Claimed by Triplet Alpha Kings, the Omega's unavoidable fate changed every wolf kingdom. Selene had never been anything special. In the small border pack where she was born, Omegas were the lowest rung of the pack ladder, expected to serve, to stay quiet, to be grateful for whatever scraps of belonging they were given. She had grown up hearing whispers about her weak bloodline, her thin frame, her inability to shift with the speed and power the other wolves prized. By the time she was old enough to understand her place in the world, she had stopped expecting anything from it. So when her pack leader announced that a tribute gathering was being held, a tradition where Omegas from smaller packs were presented to the great kingdoms as gestures of peace and goodwill, Selene assumed she would be overlooked, as always. She was wrong. The gathering took place in neutral territory, a vast hall built from white stone, where the most powerful alphas in the wolf world came together, once a generation. Selene stood at the edge of the crowd, trying to make herself small, when the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and 3 men walked in together. She had heard of the Triplet Kings before, the way everyone had. Kade, the eldest, ruler of the Iron Wolf Kingdom, known for his cold precision and his ability to read every threat in a room before it became one. Ronan, the second-born, ruler of the Blood Moon Kingdom, a warrior whose name alone made lesser packs surrender without a fight. And Aric, the youngest, ruler of the Shadowfang Kingdom, a king who was rarely seen, and even more rarely understood, his quiet nature hiding a mind sharper than either of his brothers. The 3 of them had never agreed on anything in their lives. Their kingdoms bordered each other, in an uneasy truce, held together by nothing but mutual respect for each other's strength. They had never shared power, never shared land, and certainly never shared anything as sacred as a mate. That changed the moment they entered the hall. Selene felt it before she understood it, a pull low in her chest, sudden and overwhelming, as if the air itself had shifted around her. Across the room, all 3 kings stopped walking at the exact same instant. Their heads turned toward her in perfect unison, nostrils flaring, eyes darkening from their natural shades into the deep, glowing color that only appeared in a wolf's eyes when a true mate bond ignited. The hall went silent. Then it erupted. No wolf alive had ever heard of a triple bond. The law was older than any kingdom in the room, a mate bond formed between one wolf and one other, an unbreakable, singular connection ordained by nature itself. For 3 alphas, let alone 3 royal alphas, let alone 3 brothers who ruled rival kingdoms, to bond with the same Omega at once was not just unprecedented. To many of the older wolves watching, it was an abomination, a violation of the order that had kept the kingdoms from tearing each other apart for centuries. Kade reached her first, his expression unreadable, but his hand closing protectively around her wrist the moment he was close enough. Ronan was a step behind him, a low growl already building in his chest as he turned to face the murmuring crowd, daring anyone to challenge what had just happened. Aric said nothing at all. He simply looked at her, really looked at her, in a way no one ever had before, and something in Selene's chest cracked open. The other alphas in the hall demanded an explanation. Some called for the bond to be broken by force, insisting that nature had made a mistake, and the Omega should be claimed by whichever king proved strongest in challenge. Others saw an opportunity, a chance to exploit the chaos, to drive a wedge between 3 of the most powerful kingdoms in the world before they could unite. But the brothers, despite a lifetime of rivalry, did something none of them expected. They stood together. Kade was the one who spoke first, his voice cutting through the noise with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. He told the assembled kings that the bond was not a mistake to be corrected, but a sign, one none of them yet understood, but one that would not be undone by anyone in that hall. Ronan backed him without hesitation, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, as a clear warning to anyone who thought to test that claim. Aric, quieter but no less firm, simply stepped beside Selene and did not move. In the days that followed, Selene was taken from her pack and brought to the shared territory that lay between the 3 kingdoms, a stretch of land the brothers rarely used, now suddenly the center of everything. She was given rooms in a fortress none of them had ever truly lived in together, and for the first time in her life, she was surrounded by power instead of dismissed by it. It did not make things simple. Kade treated her like something to be protected and studied in equal measure, assigning guards to her, asking careful questions about her pack and her past, trying to understand the bond the way he understood everything, through strategy. Ronan was the opposite, all instinct and fire, fiercely loyal from the first night, the kind of devotion that left no room for doubt, but came wrapped in an intensity that sometimes frightened her. Aric was the one who actually spoke to her like a person, who sat with her in silence when she didn't want to talk, and asked nothing of her except honesty. Selene found herself caught between three men who agreed on almost nothing except her, and she could not shake the fear that she wasn't the reason for their unity at all, that she was simply the excuse, the political convenience that let three rival kingdoms justify standing together without losing face. She had spent her whole life being told she was worth nothing. It was hard to believe, now, that she was suddenly worth everything. The threat came from outside, as it always does in moments like these. A coalition of rival kings, alphas from kingdoms that had long resented the power the Triplet brothers held, even when they were divided, saw the bond as exactly what their enemies feared, a weakness to exploit. Word spread that whoever managed to seize Selene, whoever broke the unprecedented bond and claimed her for themselves, would not only humiliate the three kings, but fracture the shaky peace holding their territories together. An attack was planned, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore as enemy wolves began testing the borders of the shared territory under cover of night. For the first time in their lives, Kade, Ronan, and Aric were forced to do what no law, no treaty, and no shared blood had ever made them do before: lead as one. Kade organized the defense, mapping every weakness in the shared land's borders. Ronan trained the combined forces of all three kingdoms, men who had once seen each other as rivals, now standing shoulder to shoulder under his command. Aric worked in the shadows, uncovering the names of nobles within their own courts, who had been feeding information to the enemy coalition, hoping to see the brothers' alliance collapse from the inside. Selene refused to simply wait behind fortress walls while others fought for her. She had spent her entire life being protected from her own potential, told she was too weak to matter, and she was done believing it. When the attack finally came, a coordinated assault meant to overwhelm the shared territory before the brothers could properly unite their forces. Selene stood on the front lines instead of hiding from them. It was in the middle of that battle, with enemy wolves closing in, and the brothers fighting back to back to protect her, that something inside Selene finally broke free. A strength she had never known she carried surged through her, a power that did not belong to any ordinary Omega, the kind of power the old stories spoke of, and the modern world had long assumed extinct. Her shift came faster and fiercer than anyone had ever seen from an Omega, and when she stood at full height between the three kings she loved, the enemy coalition's forces faltered for the first time since the fighting began. It was not Kade's strategy, or Ronan's strength, or Aric's cunning that turned the tide of that war. It was Selene, finally standing in her own power instead of shrinking from it, proving in front of every kingdom watching that she had never been a weakness to protect. She was the reason the bond existed at all. When the battle ended and the coalition's forces retreated, broken and humiliated, the wolf world was forced to reckon with something it had never faced before. The ancient law that forbade a mate bond from being shared was rewritten that same season, the elders of every kingdom finally acknowledging what could no longer be denied, that some bonds defy the rules nature was once thought to have written in stone. Selene was crowned alongside Kade, Ronan, and Aric, not as a prize claimed by three kings, but as their equal, the joint sovereign of a wolf nation, now unified for the first time in generations. The kingdoms that had spent centuries circling each other in distrust found, almost by accident, a lasting peace, built on the very bond that had once threatened to tear them apart. What had once seemed like an unavoidable, even cursed fate for an overlooked Omega from a forgotten border pack became instead the foundation of everything that followed. Selene's story spread far beyond the borders of the three kingdoms, told and retold in every pack that had once dismissed her. Proof that the wolf world's oldest laws could bend when something stronger than tradition stood in their way.